Somewhere in a Pennsylvania field this summer, a hay baler built before the Vietnam War is still tying knots perfectly. No sensors, no error codes, no dealer laptop, just cast iron, chain drive, and a knotter mechanism so clever it hasn't been fundamentally redesigned in 80 years. Meanwhile, brand new balers sit idle waiting on a control module. These 10 machines from the 1950s aren't just surviving. On a lot of small farms, they're still the ones getting the hay in. Number 10. The Minneapolis-Moline Bale-O-Matic. We're starting with the one almost nobody talks about, and that's exactly why it belongs here. Minneapolis-Moline was never a baler company. They were tractor people, combine people, the Prairie Gold outfit from the Twin Cities. But when the automatic baler revolution hit American agriculture in the mid-1940s, they built one anyway, and they built it like a bridge. The Bale-O-Matic ran from roughly 1945 to 1953, and records point to about 13,920 units built across its production life. That's a modest number by New Holland standards, but here's the thing, it means every surviving one is a genuine rarity, and the ones that survived because they were overbuilt from day one. It was a wire tie machine. It carried its own Wisconsin V4 engine, so the tractor pulling it only had to do exactly one job: pull. That mattered enormously in the 1940s, when most tractors on most farms had no live PTO and barely enough horsepower to justify the fuel. The earliest versions used a canvas conveyor to feed the crop. Later machines switched to raker bar feeding, which handled tough windrows better. The flywheel was enormous. Collectors describe one over a meter across, and that flywheel is the whole secret of why these old machines punch above their weight. Restored examples still run at threshing shows across the Midwest and Australia, and the Australian owners will tell you fewer than 100 ever made it to that continent. It's a museum piece now, but it's a museum piece that still bales. Number 9. The New Holland Model 77. Long before the Hayliner became one of the most recognizable names in agriculture, there was the machine that convinced thousands of farmers an automatic baler could actually replace hand labor. The New Holland Model 77 arrived in 1949, directly descended from Edwin Nolt's revolutionary automatic pickup baler. By then, the idea of one machine picking up hay, compressing it, tying it, and dropping finished bales on the ground had already changed farming forever. The 77 simply made the concept bigger, stronger, and capable of handling commercial workloads. Powered by its own Wisconsin air-cooled four-cylinder engine, the Model 77 was built for farms where tractors still lacked enough PTO power to run a heavy baler reliably. The tractor only had to pull. The engine did everything else. It produced the industry-standard 16 by 18-inch bale. And for many custom operators that meant one thing: more hay before sunset. But reliability wasn't what made the 77 famous. Its knotters became the benchmark everyone else tried to match. When properly adjusted, they tied bale after bale with remarkable consistency, helping cement New Holland's reputation as the company that simply knew how to build knotters better than almost anyone else. Today, restored Model 77 still appear at threshing demonstrations across North America. Watch one running in a windrow and you'll notice something immediately. The rhythm never seems rushed. The pickup feeds evenly, the plunger cycles with heavy mechanical confidence, and finished bales keep sliding out as though the machine never realized it was built more than 75 years ago. For thousands of farmers, the Model 77 wasn't just another baler. It was the machine that proved automatic baling had truly arrived. Number 8. The Case 130 series. Case has a genuinely strange baler history, and it's worth understanding because it explains why the 130 matters. Through the 1940s, Case absolutely dominated the hand-tie pickup baler market. Their machines had seats mounted on each side of the bale chamber, where two men rode along, poking wires through and twisting them by hand, bale after bale, all day, in the dust and the heat. It was one of the worst jobs in American agriculture, and Case owned that market. Then the automatic knotter arrived and rewrote everything. Case scrambled. A 1950 brochure introduced the NCMT, their automatic twine tie machine. with advertising copy that essentially bragged farmers would now only need baling wire for repairs. In 1953 came the NT Slicer baler. In 1954, the Model 140 with a genuinely clever twin plunger arrangement, one plunger slicing the charge, one compressing it, working in balanced opposition. Then in 1955, Case introduced the Model 130, aimed squarely at what their literature called the family-sized farm. The 130's defining feature was its side-mounted knotter. Instead of tying across the top of the bale, the knotters sat on the side of the chamber. This has one enormous practical advantage that anybody who has ever serviced a baler will appreciate instantly. You can actually see the knotter. You can reach it standing on the ground. You can clean it, adjust it, and diagnose a mistie without climbing up onto a hot machine. I'll be straight about the drawbacks, because this channel doesn't sell fantasies. Early 130s had real teething problems. Some owners recall factory reps arriving to install updates before the machine ever reached the field, and broken needles on the first attempt. Case redesigned the top stuffer for the follow-on 133. The 130 was not a flawless machine, but the survivors, the ones that got the updates and got maintained, turned into workhorses. Owners report Case balers of this family running thousands of bales per year for decades. That's the pattern with 1950s iron. Fix the design flaw once and the machine runs forever. Number 7. The Massey-Harris 701. Now we go to Britain and Europe, because the American story is only half of it. The Massey-Harris 701, sold as the #1 in North America and the 801 in France, was the machine that mechanized haymaking across huge stretches of the British countryside. It reached meaningful UK production around 1951 and sold in serious numbers through the decade. And it had one of the most delightfully practical features ever fitted to a hay baler. The 701 carried its own engine because British tractors of the era frequently had no usable power takeoff. Buyers could specify a standard motor company vaporizing oil engine or a 2-cylinder Armstrong Siddeley diesel. Here's the good part: that engine could be unbolted from the baler in the off-season and used as a stationary power source for other jobs around the farm. You bought a hay baler, and 11 months of the year it doubled as a power unit. That is a philosophy of machine design that has completely vanished from modern agriculture. Nothing on a 2026 baler can be repurposed for anything. The 701 was designed by people who understood that a farmer's capital is finite and every pound of iron on the place ought to earn its keep more than once. The 701 is visually unmistakable too. It has a huge inline wadboard that rises and falls, nearly 2 feet with each stroke, which collectors compare to a nodding donkey oil pump. It looks alive when it's running. The bales came out on their narrow edge, which was later recognized as a handling disadvantage. When Massey Ferguson launched the completely redesigned 703 in 1957, they turned the chamber so bales exited flat, with the strings on top and bottom, much easier to grab. That layout became the industry standard for the next 20 years. But dozens of 701s are still alive today in restored condition across Britain and Ireland, and there is footage of them still baling 60+ years on with their original engines. Number 6. The McCormick No. 45. International Harvesters No. 45 ran from roughly 1946 through to about 1957, when the Model 46 replaced it, and it earned a reputation that's genuinely split down the middle. Some operators loved it, others would happily have watched it go to the scrapyard. You'll find both opinions in any gathering of old iron people, stated with equal conviction. Here's what's not in dispute. The No. 45 was one of the first machines to popularize auger cross-feeding. The pickup gathers the windrow off to the side, and an auger sweeps it laterally into the bale chamber. That's the architecture that eventually won. Look at almost any small square baler built in the last 50 years, and you'll see the same fundamental layout, refined but recognizably descended from these mid-century auger feed machines. The No. 45's weakness was knotter reliability. Multiple operators of the era recall that the 45 didn't tie as consistently as the New Holland machines it competed against. And in baling, a mistie isn't just a lost bale. It's a stopped machine, a broken windrow and hay lying in the field while the weather turns. So why does it make this list? Because the ones that survived have been sorted out. 70 years of owners have identified every weak point, corrected every adjustment, and the knotter timing on a well-set-up 45 today is a solved problem. There's a recurring story in old equipment circles. Somebody buys a number 45 for $150, greases it, adjusts one twine knife, runs 20 bales through it in the barnyard, and it ties all 20. That's a machine built in the Truman administration, sitting outdoors for decades, coming back to work after an afternoon of maintenance. Try that with anything built this century. Number 5. The McCormick 55T and 55W. International Harvester learned from the number 45, and what they learned became the 55. According to International Harvester's own production records, the 55T twine tie ran from 1953 to 1959 with 13,337 units built, and the wire tie 55W over the same span with 15,842 units. Together, that's well over 29,000 machines, a serious volume seller and a substantial upgrade on the earlier 50T, which managed 8,144 units between 1944 and 1952. Note something interesting in those numbers. The wire tie version outsold the twine version. In the mid-1950s, plenty of American farmers still trusted wire over twine, particularly anyone shipping hay long distances or dealing with rodents in the barn. Twine won eventually, but it was not a walkover. The 55 offered something the 50T couldn't: real drivetrain flexibility. You could specify it with a mounted engine, a Farmall A power plant, or you could run it straight off the tractor's power takeoff. That single option is why so many are still working. Here's the logic. An engine-driven baler is only as good as its engine, and a 70-year-old auxiliary engine is a maintenance liability. Carburetors, magnetos, cooling fins packed with chaff. A PTO machine has none of that. Hook it to any tractor with a live PTO and adequate horsepower, and the baler doesn't care whether that tractor was built in 1955 or 2015. Custom operators ran these hard. There are accounts of men trading up from a 50T to a PTO 55T in the late 1950s and doing custom baling with it into the early 1970s, better than a decade of commercial run it till it drops work before finally replacing it. And that's just the first owner. Number 4. The John Deere 116W Sidewinder. This one is on the list because it's genuinely structurally weird, and because weird machines that survive 70 years have usually earned it. The John Deere 116T relay ran from 1946 through to about 1956, joined around 1950 by the smaller one, 14T. Both were wire tie only. Both used a distinctive twisting and cutting mechanism for the wire rather than a conventional twine knotter, and both are known to collectors by an unofficial nickname, Sidewinders, because the bales came out the side. Instead of feeding hay forward into a chamber running the length of the machine, the 116Y fed hay directly into a bale case that extended off to one side. The finished bales emerged laterally. It looks wrong to modern eyes. It works. The wire twisting mechanism on these is worth appreciating in its own right. It is genuinely unique engineering, not a licensed knotter design, not a copy of anybody. A properly original Deere solution to the problem of securing a bale under compression. Watch one operate and it's mesmerizing. Why does it still work harder than modern equipment? 2 reasons. First, wire tie means no twine, and no twine means the single most common failure mode of modern small square balers. Knotter misties from cheap or inconsistent twine simply doesn't exist. Wire is wire. It doesn't stretch differently between batches. Second, and more importantly, John Deere built these things out of material. There's no plastic. There's no sheet metal shroud pretending to be structure. Every component that carries load is iron, and it's sized generously, because in 1946 engineers didn't have finite element analysis to shave weight. They just made it thicker and went home. The 116W was killed by the market, not by mechanical failure. When Deere's own twine tie machine arrived in the mid-1950s, wire tie sales collapsed almost overnight, and Deere discontinued the Sidewinder within about 1 year. It didn't fail, it was simply obsoleted. Number 3. The Allis-Chalmers Roto-Baler. Every round bale in every field on Earth traces back to this machine. The idea came from the Lubin family of Sutton, Nebraska, whose work on rolled bales stretched back to the early 1900s. Allis-Chalmers bought the rights around 1940, built prototypes through the war years, secured a patent in December 1945, and put the Roto-Baler into production in 1947. About 3,000 were built in that first year. They sold. Within 3 years, more than 23,000 were out working. By the time AC wound down the main production run around 1960, total sales exceeded 70,000 units. Built at the LaPorte, Indiana works, it was the first mass-produced round baler in history, turning out bales roughly 14 to 22 inches in diameter, small enough for one person to carry. The price in 1947 was $935, roughly $9,000 in today's money, for a machine that invented an entire category. Now here's what makes it remarkable and also maddening. The Roto-Baler is arguably the most mechanically complex farm implement ever put into mass production. It runs on springs, latches, bearings, chains, and belts, and every single one has to be correct. One veteran operator described it as being as delicate to operate as a sewing machine. Another noted there was a specific ritual you had to perform to get it started each season, and it required you to stop the tractor to tie and eject each bale. Forward, stop, tie, eject, forward, all day. That's the trade-off. What you got in return was genuinely revolutionary. The bales shed water. The rolled outer layer creates a thatched roof effect, so you could leave them lying in the field and collect them when you actually had time, rather than racing the weather to get square bales under cover the same day. Allis-Chalmers tried to fix the stop-start problem with the number 10 constant feed Roto-Baler, but only around 1,500 were built, and most were eventually converted back to standard configuration. Some of its features, though, the wing-type rotary feeder in particular, became standard equipment. A working Roto-Baler in 2026 represents a level of mechanical sympathy that essentially doesn't exist anymore. The people who keep them running can hear a problem before they can see it. That's not nostalgia, that's a skill. Number 2. The John Deere 14T. If there's one 1950s baler still genuinely earning money on working farms today, it's this one. The 14T was John Deere's first twine-tie baler, arriving in the mid-1950s. Sources put its introduction at 1955 or 1956, and Deere Parts record shows serial number breaks referencing 1955. It made a 14 by 18-inch baler, ran a 51-inch pickup, used a 2-knotter twine system, needed a minimum of about 35 PTO horsepower, and spun a 27-inch flywheel off a 540 RPM PTO. Those aren't impressive numbers. They're the right numbers. 35 PTO horsepower means you can pull a 14T with practically any farm tractor built in the last 75 years. A Farmall M, a John Deere, B, a 25-year-old utility tractor, a compact diesel. That's not a small thing. It means the 14T never became orphaned by the horsepower race, the way so many implements did. The 14T did to the wire tie market what the automatic knotter did to hand tying. It wiped it out. Deere discontinued the Sidewinder wire balers within about 1 year of the 14T arriving. Now let's talk about capacity, because there's a persistent myth that these old balers can't do real work. In online forums, people will tell a young farmer that a 14T is good for maybe 5 acres a day. That claim gets demolished by people who actually ran them. One operator describes baling with a 14T behind a Farmall M in the late 1960s. 750 to 900 bales in an afternoon, roughly noon to 6. 2 people, one driving, one loading. Hay bales at 65 to 70 pounds each, straw at around 35. Do the math. That's meaningfully more than 150 bales an hour, sustained with a machine that was already more than a decade old at the time. And here is the part that matters most. There are countless stories of a 14T sitting in a barn for 20 years, dusty, one flat tire, and the owner rolls the flywheel over by hand and the knotters tie, grease it, oil it, air the tire, and it goes back to work. The 14T's real superpower, though, is parts. Because Deere built so many, and because the design remained largely intact through the 214T and 224T, there is a living aftermarket right now. Reconditioned knotter frames, new manufacture tucker fingers, slip clutch assemblies, friction discs. You can still buy the parts in 2026. For a baler from the Eisenhower era, try sourcing a control module for a 15-year-old baler and see how that goes. Number 1. The New Holland 66. Number 1 is a tie because you cannot separate them. They're the two halves of the machine that defined the entire decade. Start with the history because it's remarkable. In 1937, a Pennsylvania farmer named Edwin Nolt hand-built the first successful automatic pickup, self-tying hay baler in Farmersville, Pennsylvania. 5 were built in 1938, 30 in 1939. In 1940, Nolt moved production into the New Holland Machine Company factory. His patent was granted in 1941, and the Model 73 went on to sell more than 20,000 units in 7 years. The American Society of Agricultural Engineers formally recognized the achievement with a historic landmark dedication in 1976. Before Nolt's machine, baling took 3 men, a driver plus 2 poor souls riding the baler, poking wire and twisting knots in the dust. After it, 1 man on the tractor and a boy to catch misties could do the whole job. Then came the 66, launched in the early 1950s. The sources disagree between 1951, 1952, and 1953, and I'd rather tell you that than pick one and pretend. Reported sales around 84,000 units. The 66's genius was restraint. It made a 14 by 18 inch bale instead of the industry standard 16 by 18. So bales were lighter and one person could stack all day. With its wheels removed, it stood only 4 feet tall, which made it dramatically cheaper to ship a boring commercial detail that got the machine onto small farms all over the world. It ran a 13 horsepower petrol or vaporizing oil engine with an Enfield diesel option from 1958. British production started in the mid-1950s. That's the whole formula for why these two are number 1. The 77 proved the concept could handle serious tonnage, and the 66 made it small, light, cheap and shippable enough that ordinary farms could actually own one. New Holland kept iterating. The self-propelled Model 166 in 1956, and the first true Hayliner models in 1959. But the DNA in every small square baler on Earth today runs straight back through the 66 to a farmer in a Pennsylvania machine shop in 1937. Subscribe if you want more old iron that refuses to quit.